serious. Redditors who have gotten kidnapped before, what happened and how did you escape? Story 1. I was 24 and coming home around 3 a.m. one night from being the designated driver. I parked outside my apartment and a man with a gun approaches as I am getting out of the car. He forces me back in and yells at me to climb over into the passenger seat. I am a blubbering mess at this point and just know I am going to die. He drives me to an ATM and wants me to get him some cash. I had $4 in my bank account, so he was pretty pissed. He starts driving around and I start trying to figure out how to get myself out of the situation. I turn in my seat toward him and start trying to talk to him, even touching him on the arm so he might start seeing me as another human. While I'm doing this, I reach up behind and unlock the door. Eventually, he comes to a stop, a red light. I notice a car has pulled up behind us and I throw open the door and jump out. He grabs me and my clothes rip, but I get out. He takes off, and the people in the car behind me call the cops. A couple months later, I have to go to the police station and pick him out of a lineup. I meet 2 other women, he did this too, and realize I was extremely lucky compared to what they went through. Another year later, and I go to trial. Since my incident had the most evidence, he gets 99 years in prison and won't be eligible for parole until he is 64. Took me a number of years to feel comfortable being out alone at night. I joined an outreach program that went into prisons, and that was probably the best therapy I could have ever gotten. I am happy to say that event does not plague me any longer, and I have forgiven the man who did it. Story 2. Last summer, I went to Walmart around 1 a.m. on a Sunday night. I work night shift, so I was fairly comfortable but still aware of my surroundings. I bought an HDMI cable and a bag of chips and was walking out to my car when a car pulled up to mine. When the guy got out, I just assumed he was going into the store. I unlocked my car and he came around the side. At that point, I was a little anxious but just thought he was going to ask for money or a cigarette. Then I saw his gun. He told me not to say anything and to get in the back seat of his car. He said if I did what he said, he wouldn't hurt me. I got in his car and he gave the gun to a kid, probably 13 or so, in the passenger seat. The kid held the gun on me while the man took my wallet, phone, and keys. They drove to an ATM and withdrew all the money from my bank account. Only about $200 because I'm a broke college kid. They kept talking about whether or not they should eliminate me or let me go. I convinced them to drop me off as long as I promised not to say anything to the cops. They kept my phone but gave me my wallet and keys back and dropped me off in the ghetto. I walked to a gas station and the cashier called the cops for me. I think they had a hard time believing me because I seemed so calm, but it was the worst night of my life. Not really sure if this counts as a kidnapping since I was only with them for about 20 minutes, but it sucked. Story 3. Not me, my childhood neighbor, so probably doesn't count, but it might help somebody. The neighbor was a little girl playing in her front yard, and when the man grabbed her and covered her mouth, she bit through his arm. Took a mouthful of him. He dropped her. She ran off screaming, literal, bloody takedown. Genius went to the ER for stitches and was caught. Our moms all told us to do exactly that if that situation ever came up. Answer: that's what my mom told me to do as well. In 2nd grade, when they taught us the stranger danger stuff, I told my counselor that my parents told me to fight back, and the counselor told me instead I should be compliant. Now as an adult, I can see how compliance might piss a kidnapper off less, but these are people who target kids who they think they can control and won't call attention to the situation. Story 4. Not sure if parental kidnapping counts, but when I was 11, my father came to my mother's apartment and ended up taking me against mine and my mother's wishes. She had recently got us this apartment after weeks of living in our car after he threw us all out on the street. He had apparently been so generous he bought us, me and my 7-year-old brother, some Christmas presents and had given them to my mom to give us since she was extremely hard up for money. He showed up, tipsy, on Christmas Eve after deciding, since he bought the presents, he had to see us open them. He barged in yelling, "No fudge!" Way is Santa getting credit for these gifts, and I paid for them. They're mine. If I can't watch them open them now, I'll just take them with me. This led to a huge struggle between he and my mother. She did her best to get him out of the apartment, but even at a powerful 5'10", she was no match for a tipsy 6'3" man who had no problem with throwing fists at a woman half his size. My mom, in desperation, pulled a bat out of the closet and told him to get out. He grabbed me from the floor. Yes, me and my young brother had the privilege of watching all this happen in front of us. It's actually how my brother learned Santa wasn't real. I panicked, screaming, crying, reaching for my mom, my brother, grasping at the doorframe, then the handrail, then the door of his truck. Once inside, I was in the floorboards of his S10 freaking out. Even at 11, I could tell he was fudge up and dangerous. The next 48 hours are a blur of sadness, fear, and repressed memories. The next real memory I have is being dropped off, barefoot and in my pajamas, at the entrance to my mom's apartment complex. It was nearly a 5-minute walk in the snow to the back of the complex where her apartment was. When I got there, the police were there, but when I walked up, my mom, brother, and I just held each other and cried. I never saw my father again. He was never arrested or charged with anything. He never paid a cent in support again. He died when I was 19. I didn't care then. I don't care now. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I just can't understand how he did what he did. I can't imagine doing anything to hurt her the way he hurt me. Answer: that last line reminds me of my mom's biological dad. He has never actually done anything to her physically, but the two of them argued with each other on and off for years. My biological grandfather being a gigantic alcoholic jerk and her being bipolar. They scrapped verbally in ways you couldn't imagine, but they occasionally did get along. And then, one day, my sweet, lovely old grandpa decided to tell my mom that she should have eliminated herself, likely knowing that she's had tragic end thoughts in the past. I knew the man was a jerk, but that's when he became dead to me. They haven't really spoken since. My mom does occasionally wonder about him, talk about him. I just do my best to remind her that with a man like that, it's best to just forget he exists. Because certainly, existing is a hell of a lot more than that fuckwad deserves. Story 5. This happened about a month or so ago. I'm writing a full story and I'm going to post it on our Let's Not Meet soon. I'll try to keep this short. Basically, I went to go pick up a friend from work at around 1 a.m. She usually has to close and clean, so I wait in my car with the car off. This particular day, I had kept my car on and was messing around on my phone. A couple minutes later, I see a guy come and ask me for money. I cracked my window an inch and said no, and he left. My gut feeling was telling me something was wrong because the guy had a ski mask on. Immediately after, I see 2 other guys with him, and they walk to the front of the restaurant and sit on the outside benches. I got freaked out and was going to text my friend not to come out yet and I would pull around back. I was typing the text when suddenly I hear tapping on my window, and I looked up and the same guy had a gun to my window and told me to get out the car. I was shocked and thought it was some kind of prank, so I waited, but the other 2 came from behind and started yelling with their guns for me to get out. So I got out and told them to take whatever they want and leave me. I'm not a big guy, and 2 of the guys were huge. The big guys huddled around me and pressed their guns against my hip and told me to get in the back seat. I tried to remain calm and listen and got in the back seat. 1 got in the driver's, and the other 2 got in the back with me in the middle. The driver immediately started driving, and we left the restaurant, and they started asking me for my wallet and phone. I told him to wait and let me restore my phone, which I quickly did, and handed it to him. I told them I had no cash in my wallet and only credit cards. They thought I was lying and started threatening me about how they already had a takedown charge and weren't afraid to eliminate me. I told them I have no cash, and eventually they believed me. I told them twice to let me go and take whatever, but they told me to shut up or they will pistol whip me. So I was quiet. We drove for about 3 hours, and their plan was to escape to another state. It was nearly 4 a.m. now, and the driver was getting sleepy. He pulled into a random hotel parking lot and told everyone to sleep except for one guy to keep an eye on me. The car is an 8-seater, and the guy on my right moved to the passenger, and the guy on my left moved to the last row. I obviously couldn't sleep but pretended to be asleep. Eventually, all 3 of the guys fell asleep, and I was pretending to be asleep for almost 3 more hours. It was 7 a.m. now, and I noticed people were leaving the hotel. When I saw a couple right next to our car start to leave, I had made up my mind I was going to run. I waited and moved to the right door. I took off my slides and grabbed my ID and school ID and whatever else cards they had dropped. I took a deep breath and just ran. When I closed the door, I saw the driver wake up and yell, but I was already running. I ran past the couple, yelling "Call 911," and ran to the front lobby of the hotel. I hid in the bathroom while telling the lady at the front to call 911. At the end, police came. The guys had drove off with my car, and my family had found me and picked me up. The car was recovered with minimal damage. Please everyone be aware of your surroundings, especially late at night. I live in a good area, and nothing like this has happened before, but it was just the wrong place at the wrong time. Story 6. Well, I wasn't kidnapped, but I was babysitting my sister's kids at their house when their father came to pick them up for his weekend custody visit. I put them in the car with him, made sure they had a change of clothes, a toy apiece, and kissed them goodbye. I honestly barely spoke to their father because we already dislike each other then. I just said something like, "Be careful with them," and then he left. I locked up and left too. The next day, my sister called me and told me he had just called her from across the Mexican border. He'd taken the kids without any documentation whatsoever across and was on his way to central Mexico, where his parents live. That prompted a really miserable 2 years of researching and trying a lot of things, both legal and some not so much, to get them back. Short story, it's very difficult to extract internationally kidnapped kids from Mexico, especially when one's own country's systems are so broken and flawed. Anyway, after 2 years, my sister managed to get them back quasi-legally, more on that if someone's interested, and I was very happy to get to go with her on that trip. I don't get to see them much now since they moved out of state, but the crippling depression and despair that I was the one who inadvertently allowed them to be kidnapped has eased a bit. They're doing pretty well. The kids are in school and they seem to have reacclimated to U.S. culture well enough. They were treated very poorly in Mexico, beaten, starved, and not allowed to go to the doctor, so they both have a few ongoing health issues, but they are and have been treated for a lot of that. Answer: Claire here. This is honestly my first time on Reddit. My sister sent me the link, and I couldn't help but add on. See, the thing is, while I was going through my 2-year ordeal, not one, but 2 others in my very small circle — I grew up in a very small town, graduating class of 2 — experienced something similar. Their children were also abducted by their fathers, only in their cases it was interstate, not international abductions. I have come in contact with far too many others who are fighting to see their children again, or even to just find out where they are, or if they are still alive. Our stories are generally not told. Over 800,000 children are reported missing each year in the U.S. Of that, only 115 are traditional stranger abductions. Also, around 500 children are kidnapped from the U.S. to Mexico every year. Where I ran into the most difficulty was, oddly, not in dealing with the Mexican government, but in dealing with our own government, and worse, with our local police department. My children were never declared missing. They were never put on a list by the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. No Amber Alert was ever issued. Our local department treated me like I had done something wrong. Due to the locals refusing to work with me, the state nor the FBI would involve themselves. Our system is beyond broken. Our police are not equipped or trained to handle these situations, and we are working to change that. But things are slow go. We were lucky. Both private investigators were a joke. We spent around $50K. It was thoroughly worth it, but that money could have done so much more if there had been more information and resources available. Story 7. When I was 4, I was kidnapped by my mom. She just ran off one day without informing my dad of anything, and she stole a lot of stuff from his house. I was missing for 60 days until he found me. They ended up going to court, and he won primary and full custody over me. Story 8. I was kidnapped by my mentally ill father when I was 3. My mother had left him. We, me and my sister, who was 6 years older, were staying at our maternal grandparents'. My father came and picked us up for a weekend visit. When he was roughly 1 mile from the house, he stopped and told my sister to get out of the car. She walked back to our grandparents, and he took off with me. He took me to Arizona from Texas, called my mother, and told her he'd leave me to die in the desert if she didn't tear up the divorce papers. She convinced him that she'd come back. He returned me, and we promptly went on the run. We moved over 19 times in 10 years in an effort to hide from him. My last name was changed numerous times so he couldn't easily find me again. The truly awful part, my father wasn't the worst part of my childhood. The man my mother married when I was 6 was a pedophile. Story 9. Just putting this out there in case anyone ends up in an abduction situation. Your best bet is to fight like hell to avoid being taken to a second location. Your odds of escape are highest within the first minute of the encounter. Story 10. I wasn't kidnapped, but my son was. Last year. 1 year, 1 month, and 3 weeks ago. He was found the same day. My ex, not my son's father, was abusive and crazy. Basically, my ex and I were in an argument while in the car, and I got out of the car, went to grab my son out of the back. He was only an infant, and my ex jumped in the driver's side and took off. Long story short, police found my car with my son still in it, alone. They had sent officers to every highway in town to make sure my car wasn't leaving the area. Eventually, they found it. My son was okay, just crying and soaking wet because of his diaper. My ex was all over the newspapers because of this. I'm terrified my son will see it someday, TBH. I have a very long version of this story in my post history. I posted it on our Let's Not Meet a few months ago. Answer: I am not trying to make this scary situation more scary for you, but the reason Amber Alert situations by non-family members are so fudge scary is that somebody so unhinged to deliberately take a child is unhinged enough to do terrible things to that child. About 20 of children abducted by non-family members end in homicide. Source: hell, even abductions by family members are probably the most terrifying situation imaginable for a parent. I can't imagine how awful it would be, given that the kid is being used as leverage against another parent or used as a way to hurt the other parent in many of these cases. Either way, hug your kid tight. Glad it worked out safely. Story 11. When I was 12 years old, I sat next to a woman on a plane to Las Vegas. When my mother fell asleep on the plane, A lady in her mid-30s started talking to me. She was saying things like, "Your parents are con artists," and "I have a mansion you can come live in," and "I will give you lots of money if you leave your parents and come live with me," and things along those lines. After the plane landed and everyone was walking to get off the plane, the lady grabbed my wrist and pulled me and began ushering me in front of her. My mom lost her mind and caused a huge scene. I am not sure how the conversation went among everyone. I was very distraught, but they made me wait on the plane while police escorted the lady off the plane to question her elsewhere. To this day, I cannot believe she attempted to do this while my parents were right there and on a plane, no less. I will never know the lady's true intentions, but the older I got, the more sinister the situations became in my head. Story 12. This happened when I was very young, in the days when parents sent kids out to play and told them to come back when it gets dark. I was in first grade, outside playing as the sun set near our apartment complex, in a pretty rough neighborhood. I was walking home alone when a group of 4 young men called me over to them. I walked over to see what they wanted, and one put a knife to my throat as one other grabbed me. The one with the knife told me not to scream or they would hurt my mommy and daddy. They said they just wanted to play a game with me, and if I went quietly, they would let me go home. No problem. I was worried about my parents, so I went with them. They took me to an abandoned house somewhere in the neighborhood. They took turns touching me and argued about who would get to do what with me. They also talked a lot about hurting and eliminate me, dumping my body, etc. I was scared, so I stayed quiet and waited for it to be over. They laughed and joked constantly and seemed to be having a blast. After a few hours of this, they decided they needed tools to eliminate and dismember me. We got in a car and drove to one of their houses. 3 of the 4 went inside, and the 4th volunteered to stay and watch me. The 4th guy had stayed back most of the night and not done much to me. As an adult, I like to tell myself he felt sorry for me, and I could see it in his eyes, but that may be me projecting. When the others had entered the house, he opened the door to the car and told me to run. I took off as fast as I could and just kept running. When I got tired, I hid behind the dumpsters of another apartment complex. When I was able, I crept home. I never told my parents because I was afraid those men would hurt them. I told my best friend, who told me I should have let them have intimacy with me. She said I was old enough. Bonus. A friend of mine and her sisters were kidnapped by their father when we were in high school. He had been arrested for molesting the oldest while she was a child. Friend and sister didn't believe the oldest and maintained dad's innocence. The day before the kidnapping, we had been out walking the neighborhood. When we got back, her grandmother freaked out because she couldn't have been picked up by the father. My friend laughed it off, we hugged, and I walked home. The next day, while she was walking to the store, Dad pulled up to her in a car with a gun. The sister was tied up and gagged in the back. He had just shot her mother in the face before kidnapping the sisters. My friend got in, and the father drove them to a secluded part of the local reservoir. He violationed them for 3 days before getting tipsy enough to fall asleep. When he was asleep, my friend grabbed the gun and shot him. Her and her sisters walked out to the road. I spent every night sleeping with her for the rest of the summer because of the night terrors. She's now an adult worker in the little town where this happened. She is also addicted to crack. Story 13. I was held up at gunpoint and put in the trunk of my own car, while my friend was made to drive to the other side of town. The kidnapper dropped us off in a risky neighborhood, then drove off while threatening to shoot us. The closest thing to a movie plot line was when he yelled back that he was going to check my phone, and if I had called the cops, he was going to shoot us both. I hadn't called anyone because he would have heard me talking, but I texted my mom, so I was worried he'd see that. I took the battery out of my phone. This was in the early days of smartphones, but I still had a flip phone and put it in a board.